All right, let's just jump right in. We're about to talk about something pretty incredible, one of the world's oldest living civilizations. I mean, we're talking about a culture with a continuous story that stretches back 5,000 years. That's a story of survival, of adaptation, and just immense creativity. And that really brings us to the big question, right? The one we're going to try and unpack here. How does a culture not just survive for 5,000 years, but also manage to absorb all these different influences, new people, new ideas, new technologies, without completely losing its core identity? It's a heck of a puzzle when you think about it. You know, the source material we're looking at uses this amazing phrase to describe it: a pulsating mosaic. And I think that just nails it. It's not this single static thing, it's this vibrant, always changing pattern made up of all these different pieces that somehow, against all odds, find a way to create a unified picture. And that is what we're going to explore. Okay, so to really get our heads around how this mosaic was pieced together, we've got to do a little groundwork first. We need to be clear on our terms. I mean, what are we really talking about when we say culture or heritage? Let's break it down. So, first up, culture. It's a huge word, right? It can mean a lot of things. But the source material gives us a really useful way to think about it, breaking it down into three distinct but totally connected levels. And here they are. Think of it like a tree. This makes it super clear. Level 1, the intellectual and spiritual development. That's like the deep root system. It's the slow, unseen growth of a society's big ideas. Then you've got level 2, a particular way of life. That's the trunk and the branches, the stuff you can see, the customs, the social rules. And finally, level 3, the works of art and intellect. These are the leaves and the fruit, the beautiful, tangible things the culture produces. They all come from the same place, and you really can't have one without the others. And then there's heritage. So heritage is basically everything we inherit from the past. And it's not just the fancy stuff like art and philosophy. It's the practical things too, you know? Craftsmanship, technology, even how we relate to the world around us. It is, quite literally, the total package that shapes who we are right now. All right, so if that's what culture is, how in the world does it change over thousands of years? Because it definitely doesn't happen in a bubble. There are these really powerful forces that are always pushing and pulling on it, constantly reshaping it. This slide lays out the three big drivers perfectly. First, you've got society and history. Things like economic changes, shifting from hunting to farming, that directly impacts your traditions. Then there's political structures. If you have a huge centralized empire, you might get more of a national culture. But if it's a bunch of smaller kingdoms, you'll see all these amazing regional cultures blossom. And third, and this one is absolutely key, outside influences. And really, this is the point we have to hammer home. No society, no culture has ever existed in total isolation. It's just not how the world works. The story of Indian culture is a story of connection, through trade, sometimes through conquest, but always, always through a constant exchange of ideas with the rest of the world. And just look at some of these examples. These are things that feel so fundamentally a part of the cultural landscape today. Stitched clothing, domes and arches in buildings, paper, gunpowder, even new types of music like ghazals. These were all, at one point, new ideas that came from the outside. But they weren't just copied. They were absorbed, adapted, and woven into that mosaic, making it richer and more complex. Okay, so we've got the what and the how. Now for the fun part. Let's take a quick trip through time and see these forces in action. We're going to look at 5 key periods that really define this incredible 5,000-year story. So here's our timeline, our roadmap for the journey. We'll kick things off with a super mysterious Harappan civilization, then move through the foundational Vedic and Buddhist eras. We'll stop by the so-called golden age of the Guptas, and we'll finish up in the early medieval period, which was this incredible time of synthesis. Ready? Let's go. So, our story starts way back, around 2500 BCE, with the earliest known civilization in India, the Harappans. And these people were incredibly advanced for their time. We're talking sophisticated, planned cities when much of the world was still deep in the Bronze Age. And here's the really cool part. They had a written language that to this day, nobody has been able to decipher. What's so fascinating here is the sheer level of organization this implies. Look at this: standardized bricks, uniform styles of pottery, found across huge distances. That tells you this wasn't just a random collection of settlements. It was a highly organized society. And we even see the seeds of ideas that will blossom centuries later, like the worship of the people tree, and symbols that many scholars connect to early forms of the god Shiva. All right, next up, we see a major shift in the cultural landscape. Around 1500 BCE, the Vedic civilization comes onto the scene. This was a very different society, more agricultural, more pastoral, but its influence on modern India is just immense. This is the period where so many of the foundational texts, beliefs, and even social structures of what we now call Hinduism really start to take form. And the legacy from this period is just huge. I mean, it gave us the sacred texts of the Vedas and the deep philosophy of the Upanishads, the very bedrock of Indian thought for thousands of years. But it also established the social structure known as the caste system, or varnashram, which, as we know, has had a very long and very complex history on the subcontinent. But here's the thing about culture. It never stands still. By the 6th century BCE, a new current was starting to flow. There was a reaction against some of the rigid rituals and the social hierarchy of the time, and that environment was the perfect breeding ground for new ways of thinking, what we'd call heterodox beliefs. And the two biggest were, of course, Buddhism and Jainism. And Buddhism, in particular, was truly revolutionary for its time. It threw a direct challenge to the caste system, saying anyone from any walk of life could seek enlightenment. It really shifted the focus from complex rituals to things like personal morality, humanism, and especially nonviolence. And this cultural earthquake also led to an explosion in art and architecture. You get the great stupas and those absolutely breathtaking cave paintings. Okay, let's fast forward a bit. After some time where things were a bit more fragmented, the Gupta Empire rises around the 4th century CE, and it brings in this era of political unity and, well, what many people call a cultural golden age. This was a time of just extraordinary flowering in both the arts and the sciences. I mean, the sheer creative output from this period is staggering, but it was more than just great art. This was the era when India's foundational stories and philosophies were collected and refined. We see the great epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, get written down in their classic forms. You have the brilliant work of the poet Kalidas, who's often called India's Shakespeare. This period basically created a shared cultural language that would unite people for centuries. All right, our last stop on this whirlwind tour is the early medieval period. And if there's one word to sum up this era, it's synthesis. This is when different traditions really start to mix and mingle in powerful new ways, especially with the arrival of Islam and the rise of these amazing popular devotional movements within Hinduism. Now, this is so interesting. You see these two powerful movements, the Bhakti movement coming from a Hindu context and Sufism from an Islamic one, and they're almost like mirror images of each other. Both put the focus on a direct, personal, love-filled connection to God. Both often pushed back against rigid religious authorities and social roles like the caste system. And both believed deeply in the importance of a spiritual guide, a guru. They grew up side by side and had a huge influence on each other. So, what's the big takeaway here? After thousands of years of evolving on its own and absorbing all these outside influences, the end result wasn't one culture replacing another. It was a synthesis. What was formed was a composite, a syncretic culture. That's just a fancy way of saying a new culture was created by blending different beliefs and practices. And that process created something totally uniquely Indian. And this ancient quote, I think, just perfectly captures the spirit of this entire 5,000-year story. All that is old need not be good. All that is new need not be bad. Wise men decide after a tough test. The fools tread the beaten path. It's such a powerful reminder that a living culture isn't about just blindly holding on to the past or just chasing whatever is new. It's about a constant conversation, a process of testing ideas and wisely choosing what to carry forward. And that really is a timeless lesson on how a civilization can keep evolving without ever losing its soul.